Welcome, Christie, to the very first podcast on the Pole Dance Directory. It's very, very exciting to have you here as a world champion as we head into the annual IPSF World Championships in October, which will be in Poland this year. Before we jump into that, let's hear about your story, like your bit of your backstory. I'd love to know, when did you start pole? Why did you start pole?
Yeah. Okay. Be prepared. So I started pole when I was 49. It had been on my bucket list for years. It had just been one of those things that you see in a local paper, and there's a photo of someone, doing something on the pole. You think, gosh, from an athletic perspective, how do they do that? But everything gets in the way, and then I had an injury, a running injury at some point, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to be half a century old very soon. I think I better just tick this one off the bucket list. And so I enrolled in a beginner's course, and like so many others, I'm sure you're the same. That's it, you're hooked. So yeah, 49. That was my start, and I'm still going. Much older than that now.
Let's tell our listeners, how old are you now, Christie?
I actually have to think. What year is it? 2023. I'm 63.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
I think it's inspiring for all of us. I started pole even later than you at 51. But yeah, so it's really inspiring to know that it's something that can last for a long time, that we can keep going, through our 50s and into our 60s. And I know there are others like Greta Pontarelli who are still polling in their 70s. So it's a sport.
Amazing.
Yeah. It's a sport with longevity, which I think is really important.
Yeah.
And yes, it should come with a warning that it's addictive. I think that's very true.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So when did you make the switch from just training for fun to competing?
Look, I'd been through quite a few years, and I'd had times where I'd had surgeries and whatnot, so there were times off. And then all the way through those times off, it was, well, what am I going to do with this? I'm naturally a competitive person. I've played competitive sports all my life, and so it just sort of morphed when I got to a certain level, and I thought, I want to compete. And that in itself took me a couple of years to figure out where and how, because I'm not a pole dancer. I have plenty of pairs of heels, but generally fall over when I put them on. So it took me a while to find a competition that catered for my style, more of a gymnastics athletic style, and catered for my age. So so that led me to IPSF, and I competed in my first ever competition in Japan in 2016.
2016. So, yeah. That was a fair while ago.
That was a fair while ago, yes. Yeah, 2016, and then went to London later that year for the World Championships then.
Lovely. And so let's run through your amazing awards or wins. I know you're currently the 60+ women's world champion from Switzerland last year. Congratulations. I saw that routine live. It was phenomenal, and we will link it below this video for everyone to be able to watch you. What else have you won? Because I know you've won other titles.
So I guess I won the first one, the Japanese at the Japanese Open Championships. Then I went to London. I set a world record in Japan, which totally knocked me for six. And then went to London, set another world record, and won the World Championship there in 2016. Then I think the next one was 2019 up in Cairns, the Nationals, and won that one. But I didn't compete internationally that year. And then 2021 and 2022, I won both the Nationals and the World Championships in both those years. So
That's an impressive range of titles. So I think you're very uniquely qualified to talk to us about training for a world championship. So a little bit about, again, your background. What sort of sport background did you have before you started pole? You've mentioned a gymnastics style.
Yes. Oh, look, I did gym as a child, but it was nothing like the gymnastics that happens today. I started gym when I was 14. That's how it was. And, so I did gymnastics, I did diving. I was very much a running competitor. So athletics, touch football, hockey were my big ones. And then later on competed in track and field and competitive swimming. And then, of course, one with the other, depending on which injury I was carrying, I'd go from running to swimming and that sort of thing. So, so a fair range, and which is why I just love pole, because I love dancing. I did dance as a child, and I just loved it. And yeah, I really enjoyed that. Having music, and yeah, it's good.
But not something you've done all your life. You haven't been a gymnast all your life. You've not been a dancer all your life. So coming into it at 49, it was like picking up your childhood again, just how I felt.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, it is. And that's what I love about it, because I'm always the oldest person in the room, always, without a doubt. And if you understand that, when you're the oldest person, and yet nobody cares. And it really just brings your age right down, because you're working with, and you're falling off the pole, and you're messing up things, and then you're achieving some things just as everyone else in the room.
Yeah.
And I think it keeps you young.
Oh, definitely. So what sort of training coming up to world championships did you do? What's your secret weapon? Did you do a lot of cross training, strength training? How did you balance that with your time on the pole? What are your big takeaways?
Yeah, look, it's all I set out my first competition. I made my decision 12 months before the World Championships. I said, right, this time next year, I really want to qualify to compete in London. And so it was a 12-month out program. The hardest part is finding music. So while struggling, for me personally, it's the most important part and the hardest part. And so while you're going through all of that agony, there's establishing a fitness base. So you've got to be strong, you've got to be reasonably flexible, and you've got to have decent anaerobic endurance just to keep going. So that goes on for a while. And then once you've got your music, you start slotting things in as they happen, and as you choreograph them, and as people help you choreograph them. And then you just keep doing that. There's always cross training to prevent your body from totally breaking. So, it's always I would do 7 something every day, but I would be on the pole probably 4 or 5 sessions a week. One of those will be just purely strength, and then it'll be depending on how the body's going, and as to whether I'm doing combos or 4 run-throughs or stuff like that. So,
and that changes, I guess, over the 12 months as you get close to the competition. There's a much bigger focus, I think, on surviving your run-throughs, because it becomes a very, very long 4 minutes, I found.
Incredible, isn't it? It's just, and you think, when you look at it, you think, oh yeah, I can do that. And you might do one combination in training. Oh yeah, that's good, I'll do that again. But until you actually complete everything before and everything after it, you have no idea how difficult that combination becomes. So yeah, I really feel for you as you are in your last 4 or 5 weeks of that full run through. That's hard.
I am. Let's come back to the hardest thing, because I've found that the same too, is choosing the music. IPSF is unique, I think, for pole sports in that it cannot have any lyrics, and it's a very defined length of time, 3 minutes 50 to 4 minutes. do you have a process, or do you just listen to tons of music and shortlist? And
Look, I think my process starts with elimination. So I go through, having competed or watched lots of the championships, and I then eliminate all the stuff that you hear over and over. So, there will be a theme that happens each year. So I get rid of all of that and then just narrow it down and think, well, I have a certain style that I've always done. And then it's sort of, well, actually, no, let's see if we can do something different this time. So, and you just narrow it down and hope that somewhere along the line, you're going to have that light bulb moment and a piece of music just strikes you and you go with that.
Yeah, I was lucky my first year that happened to me, but this year it's been more a case of close enough is good enough. I'm just going to go with this.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm trying to love it, so it's working out. But yes, yeah. Do you work with a theme with that when you're choosing the music, like a story? Because pole sports isn't strictly speaking a storytelling competition, but there are points for it.
Yes, that. Yeah. And you learn that along the way. They want you to tell the story. They want you to have flow and balance and expression. And that's all in 3 minutes 50 when you're doing everything else, all the compulsories and everything. So, yeah, telling the story is very difficult. But I always find when I'm watching a routine, it's far more entertaining if there is a story, far more entertaining. So for me, if I can, I will try to tell a story. And I certainly know in 2016, I didn't do that, but, I've sort of learnt since then and try to pick something out which I guess is why you pick the music, because it sort of talks to you. So if that music speaks to you, then you want to try to express it. So, yeah, it doesn't always work though.
So what else do you think you've learnt between 2016 and 2022 that's our listeners might enjoy?
Oh my gosh, there's so many learning experiences. Every time you train, there's some sort of learning experience. I think you can't take yourself seriously. I think I have learnt not to accept growing old, but not to push myself the same way that I would have as a 40-year-old, to respect my body a little bit more. I've learnt how to try to control the nerves, the absolute anxiety of competition. And I think I've, learnt to just take each day and make the most of it, because, when you start getting to this age, as I know it has happened elsewhere in the world, older athletes actually do have accidents and things aren't so good. So, yeah, I just enjoy it. I enjoy it.
Yeah. That's a good segue into training as an older athlete. I know one of the things I've really struggled with the last year or two is a lot of what they call DOMS, so delayed onset muscle soreness, particularly relating to things like perimenopause and menopause, which affects, ladies of my age particularly. Any hints and tips for training as an older athlete, or is it really around just listening to your body and accepting it can do what it can do today?
Yeah, I think absolutely. Listening to your body and cross-training, both of them. And when you cross-train, you do nothing that's even remotely the same. Absolutely go the other side of the planet. It's that helps. It helps mentally as well as physically. And yeah, I think, as you just said, you listen to your body today. And I think that's what you have to do. And there are some times where I'll warm up. I might spend 25 minutes warming up and trying to get into the groove. And, I'll finish the warm up and I might try to do a move. And I'd say, right, no, that's it for today. It's not going to happen. And if I push it, then, something nasty might happen. So, you just accept it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes, that's good, wise advice for any age, I think, actually.
Yeah. Well, I always remember, and I know you'd said, oh, what about role models? But Carl Lewis was one of my great role models, the 100-meter sprinter. And I used to, when I did track and field, and I would read all sorts of things from him in his training diaries and stuff like that. And he always said he would go out, his training quite often, a couple of times a week, was to go out and run 100 meters. And that's it. Done. Finished for the day. And this guy who won so many Olympic gold medals and set records, and he would do, just run once. So I always carry that with me, that it's not necessarily the quantity of training, it's the quality.
That's a really good tip. Yes, I like that a lot. Yes, sometimes it's just putting on the shoes. And if that's all you can do today, yeah, I've followed that one too. Yes. So yes, idols and role models. Who are your pole idols these days? Who do you like to watch, or do you try to stay away from it? I mean, Instagram can be a real rabbit hole of comparison, which can be very hard for beginning polers.
Oh yes, and that's the problem with Insta and so many other avenues of social media. There's so much. So I used to have one or two polers that I would watch, and now there's no one in particular, because I just go down that rabbit hole of Insta, and I must admit, I will scroll through. If someone's in a G-string, I just keep moving through it, because I think, well, I can't relate to that. I'll never be able to do that, so I'm not going to bother with that one. I love watching the men. Alberto from Spain. Alberto, I can't think of his surname. Just incredible. You'll see him. I'm sure he's competing this year. Watch out for him. Little, pint-sized rocket, but man, he is good. Una Kiviela. She hasn't been around for a while that I'm aware of, but she was always beautiful to watch. But yeah, it's really not one person in particular.
Yeah, I can understand that. And what about another favourite question for polers is, what's your favourite move, and what's perhaps your pole nemesis move?
Oh, I can start with the pole nemesis move, a phoenix. It's definitely my pole nemesis move. My favourite move, I think it's got to be a reverse butterfly. I just it's a spin, a reverse.
SP54.
Is that a good girl? I don't know. Yes, of course you're doing it too. Yeah. So I love that. Don't know why. I just love it.
It is a fun one. I like doing it too, actually. Yeah. And have there been other nemesis moves in your past that you've conquered, and how did you get there?
I don't think so. Gosh, I don't know. I mean, any move that you start, any element that you start learning is a nemesis, and you just keep going. I think one of them might have been the Russian split that I tried quite early on when they first came out and were popular, and I didn't have the flexibility or the strength or the awareness to do it. And so there were a lot of major fails. And then, later in the last maybe 4 years, I took it up, tried it again. And I thought, no, I'm going to get this. So I did finally conquer it, not well enough to put in a world's routine. But yeah, it's probably one, but too many, Fiona, way too many to mention.
Yeah, I get that. All right, that's been really amazingly helpful. Is there anything else that you'd like to touch on? We touched on a fine line between overtraining and injury, loneliness of training alone. I know that can be a big one for a lot of polers competing. It's a very lonely journey.
Look, if if you love it, I go back to what I said earlier on. If you've got a piece of music that speaks to you and you love pole, then that's your focus. That's your focus. And you train alone a lot. You have to. You can't be distracted with too many other people, and just be single-minded and have that goal of whether it's to, compete in the nationals or qualify for the worlds or get to the worlds or go as a spectator. But as long as you know where you're going, everything else just falls into place.
Excellent. So any last advice for a beginner, for someone who might feel very intimidated and unsure about where to start?
Oh, look at me. Yeah, I'm 63 and I still love it. Don't ever be intimidated. I will go to a studio and do a class, and you've got these gorgeous young things that can do so much. Never be intimidated. Just, just love it up.
It is a very friendly community. I think that's something I was very surprised with, and I've found as I've visited a few different studios around the place. You're always just welcome to just one of the gang.
Yeah, and that will continue around the world too. And there'll be people you will meet, and then you'll continue to have contact with them and go visit their studios years later. That gives me goosebumps. It is such a close, tight community.
Thank you. I'm going to put you on the spot. One last question. Will we see you back competing at Worlds next year?
If my body holds together, absolutely.
Yes.